And we welcome you to this edition of Night Shift, the final one in 2025. Eric Lopez alongside Bryson Turner. Coming up, we're going to get you set for football. Some comings and reportedly goings, a lot of goings with the football roster, with the transfer portal officially scheduled to open up on January 2nd. We'll kind of break it down and preview that. Bryce and I have written articles to get you ready for the portal and the needs. We'll break that down, see where we agree and disagree on that. Basketball. Big 12 play starts this weekend for the men against Kansas on Saturday. The men, what we expect from them in the Big 12. The women drop their Big 12 opener. They get on the road to Lubbock to take on Texas Tech. But plus, we'll discuss our all-quarter century teams articles on blackandgoldbanneret.com, which you can read right now on that. Bryce and I will kind of break it down a little bit. And it was a very, very exciting panel debates as we picked the 15-player rosters for both the men's and the women's basketball roster from the last quarter century on all that. Bryson, tell the audience where they can find that articles as well as the social media, because you've been busy platform putting them all over social media.
Yes, you can, of course, find our quarter century teams at blackandgoldbanneret.com. We post about it on Black and Gold Banneret on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter X. And of course, you can find my content about, Eric mentioned about the needs in the portal. You can follow my content on those sorts of things on UCF Knights on SI. That's at UCF Knights on SI on Twitter. And of course, you can always follow my personal account at It's Bryson Turner, where all of my stuff that I do, both for SI and for the Banneret, both kind of get promoted on there. So that's a good one-stop shop there.
All right, let's get into it with football news. We're recording this on late Tuesday afternoon, December 30th, a couple of hours after reports that Horace Lockett is the latest Knight to reportedly will enter the transfer portal when officially it opens up January 2nd. Many national media, including Pete Thamel of ESPN, reporting that. That is the sixth UCF defensive tackle to reportedly going to enter the transfer portal, according to Orlando Sentinel's very own Matt Michelle. 24 players, Bryson, now are scheduled at least as of December 30th to enter the transfer portal. Don't be surprised if there's some more, perhaps, but 24 UCF players right now projected to be entering the portal. 16 of them are from the defensive side of the ball. 6 of them on the defensive tackles. I wrote for blackandgoldbanneret.com the 5 areas that UCF Scott Frost and this coaching staff had to address with the roster for the portal, and one of them was the defensive tackle. I had to update it as soon as the Lockett news comes out. UCF is down to 4 defensive tackles on the roster, Bryson. Your reaction first to the Lockett news and just overall, let's start there, about this defensive tackle, which to me now has become a big priority this portal season. A ton of defensive guys leaving, a ton of guys in particular in the defensive line are gone.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the defensive tackle room has really been the one that's been absolutely gutted by the portal. I mean, the good news is we haven't heard anything out of RJ Jackson Jr. He is the one that was an all Big 12 honorable mention. So it seems to me that resources will probably have gone to retain him. At least we'll see. We'll see what happens with the portal. Jefferson LaFontant, who is also staying. He's a Bethune-Thukban transfer. He's still around as well. He got playing time in the majority of this season. But then you have a pair of or not youngsters, but Keyshawn Hudson, redshirt junior, didn't get much time on the field. And then Trenton Turner, who's a true freshman out of Lakeland High School, probably going to redshirt this past season. He didn't see the field. So not exactly a lot to build off of. It's not nothing, but you definitely need to get a lot of additions from the transfer portal if you want to build up on that. Lockett's news was particularly shocking to me just because he was gone with injury for a large part of the season. So you think that maybe he wouldn't fetch that big of an asking price on the market, and so you think he wouldn't put himself in the transfer portal just because his injury might reduce his value. But I don't know, maybe, and of course, players are kind of using NIL agents now. So maybe NIL agents are starting to, really function in that kind of agent slash publicist role where an agent will be able to go out to teams and be like, hey, I know my guy's been injured, but his rehab's been going really well and he did really good before the injury. So that we could be seeing the consequences of that there. We'll see. But I think Lockett in particular, because I thought that we were that the defensive tackle departures were done after the 5, but Lockett now making it 6. That's a particular shock this late before the portal opens.
Now, I'm going to use financial figures. This was a courtesy of ESPN's Max Olson, who in August wrote a great piece breaking down what each position on average was making through the portal and their value. So, for example, according to his article, defensive tackles make around $300,000 to $800,000 average in the market right now, which is just unbelievable. Edge rushers are making around 500,000 to $1 million, according to Max Olson's article. And I only bring that up, Bryce, because UCF's also going to be without Malachi Lawrence, who, by the way, if you look at some of the NFL draft stock, his stock's moving up. Could be a late first-round pick if he has a good combine. So good for him. And then Kelly is another one that likely is gone. In theory, could win another year of eligibility with this JUCO ruling and all that. But the thinking is, even if he does, he'll probably use that to go elsewhere or go pro. So I wouldn't assume that he'll return. Let's just assume he doesn't return. That's a lot of pieces for Alex Grinch to replace here, Bryson, as well as the defensive line there in particular, which I think we all thought was a strength of this team last year.
Oh yeah.
Defensive tackle coach Kenny Martin and defensive end coach Mike Dawson, they got their work cut out for them here now.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Defensive ends. I mean, look, we already knew we were going to be without Malachi Lawrence and probably Nigel Kelly after this season. They were very experienced. They didn't actually even, in fact, UCF didn't exactly get a lot from edge rushers in the transfer portal this past offseason because they already had it covered with Lawrence and Kelly. The big shock to me was Jamal Johnson entering the transfer portal because he was the primary edge rusher after those two. So he was in line to really get a good increase in playing time. And he's from Miami. He's a Florida guy. So no, there wasn't really a lot that said this guy was going to hit the transfer portal. But that being said, given how valuable edge rushers can be in the portal, entirely possible that they could be chasing the bag on that one, which is not exactly ideal for a UCF edge room that now at this point when you look at who's available, that the most prominent defensive linemen that are set to come back, all Big 12 honorable mention, RJ Jackson Jr. so far hasn't heard anything about him staying or going. And then Sincere Edwards, who, if you remember, he transferred in from he's a sophomore. I believe he transferred in from Syracuse, I want to say. Or it was either Syracuse or Pittsburgh, but he was doing quite well as a backup, as a primary backup to Lawrence and Kelly, and then he ended up getting injured and was out for a while. So when your primary guys that are stepping up into this place are Sincere and RJ Jackson Jr., and that's it. Yeah, you're going to need to make some additions in the transfer portal if you want to really keep up, at least with the defensive line of this past season.
Keep in mind, the portal opens January 2nd. It'll be open up until January 16th. So there's guys that are still going to enter, probably, not just here, but all over the country over the next week or two. It's going to be wild.
There's a lot. I think, if I remember right, I think I saw a report that FBS programs that have lost the most players are in like that. I believe like the borderline of the top 5 is in that low 20s. UCF is right there.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of Big 12 schools, by the way, that have lost a lot of players right now. Currently projected to go to the portal. For example, Iowa State and Oklahoma State are in the mid 40s. Now, there was a coaching change there, so that's very normal, especially with Iowa State, with Matt Campbell going to Penn State. Colorado is right there in the mid-20s, so UCF is creeping up there on the top 5. Let me ask you this before we move on to another position. There's a part of me that's wondering if you and John Walker come to an agreement, whatever that agreement is, do you think all these guys leave? Because it feels to me, Bryson, from the outside, as soon as John Walker left, that kind of opened the floodgates for everybody else to bull all of a sudden, either because the other guys felt, hey, I got leverage over UCF, or UCF, from what hearsay, UCF is holding firm on a certain number for defensive tackles. I just wonder if John Walker is still here. Do all of these guys leave? I don't think LeBlanc leaves necessarily, but I wonder. Again, I'm just trying to figure this out because I am surprised by the amount. I'm not, and people are going to say, well, there's not a superstar player that you lose here. I agree. That's not the issue. The issue is the amount that you're losing, because that's your depth. And you're basically replacing, now you're going to have to replace other guys. And I don't know if you're going to have depth next year, in that regard. But I just wonder if you come to terms with Walker, which was a hot topic, you and I were at a recent Johnny Dawkins media availability, and some of our colleagues, we had a big debate about should Walker take care of him or not and his value. I just wonder if that would have changed anything. What do you think?
It maybe not. Like you've said, if UCF had a certain number that they wanted to spend for defensive tackles, John Walker could easily have seen that and taken or left that offer, but then communicated with his fellow players what that was. And then the players could then say, okay, I'm willing to stay, or, oh, wow, they just spent this money on John Walker. How much is there left for me? So I don't know. I mean, in this era, the way that college football is right now, it is basically every man for himself. It's feeling like the NBA in that way, if I'm being honest. And so everyone is making the decision they feel is best for them. And I think John Walker's decision could easily have left an impact on it. But that being said, it could easily have not changed anything. It changed anything. So I can't really say for sure, but I think John Walker's departure could easily have set the tone. I think because him leaving, if John Walker communicated what the asking price was, or if they had the same agent. There's also the fact that some of these players had the same NIL agents. And so if that information is shared between those people, between players, then that would basically mean that, okay, if they're not going to spend this much money on John Walker, then they're clearly not going to spend a lot of money on defensive tackles in general. I should just go test my options. So it really depends on just who's communicating with who's in contact with who, and what everyone's balking point is.
I agree with all that. Add this: Lee Hunter left for Texas Tech for reportedly $1.9 million. Things are going well for him. Let's just say that.
Well,
You don't think guys notice that too? Like, you don't think I agree with you. I think there's a lot of word of mouth. Hey, enter the portal, you get the leverage, see what happens. There's a risk. Some of these guys may be disappointed what they end up with, but that's to each his own. I want to move on to another position on the defensive side of the ball, because this was one position that you had on SI. You had 3 things they needed to address. I had 5. The one thing you and I did not have on our list was defensive back. You had defensive back on your list, and I bring that up because UCF has a new secondary coach. Break down the new coach and what you think he needs to do, because clearly that was one of the areas you think UCF has to address here.
yes. So the big thing with defensive backs is that the major playmakers in the secondary are the ones that are going to be leaving. Philip Dunham was a major factor there. Isaiah Reed is gone as well. There's a chance Jaden Williams ends up leaving. I don't know. It depends on if he gets a medical red shirt or not. So there is that. And of course, I mean, considering how well UCF did with passing efficiency defense, they also had Jair Brown. They lost to the portal. With the fact that Jakari Henderson has entered the transfer portal, there's always a chance his twin brother Damari could follow him, and Damari was a big player this season. So with the already loss of Philip Dunn to the draft and then potential losses you could see from the portal for a defensive back room that really was productive this past season, it's Will Johnson is going to really need to do his best to try to retain those players. That actually could be a reason why we haven't seen a lot of word out of him. There could also be that some of these players might maybe be like, let's just see how the new coach is before we make a decision on that. So for all we know, we could have a slew of people deciding to leave once they figure, okay, yeah, I'm not going to fit with what this new coach wants. With that being said, though, there's still, I think, some players that Coach Johnson would probably want to bring with him into the transfer portal. We've seen some North Dakota State cornerbacks. He was the cornerbacks coach at North Dakota State before this. We've seen some of those Bison corners entering the transfer portal in recent days since Johnson's move to UCF was announced. Especially one among them is Jaquise Alexander. I believe Jaquise is how you pronounce it. He was a corner from North Dakota State. He's originally from Ruskin, Florida, and he actually used to play high school ball at Tampa Catholic for UCF's director of high school relations, Jarris McIntyre. So not only was he with UCF's new defensive backs coach, but he also knows another member of UCF's football staff and is a Florida native. So I think Johnson's addition could easily be, he already has some guys that can be like, I know some guys that I could probably bring with me to kind of help, fill out the depth. The big thing that we're going to want to bank on is, will the major people that have years of eligibility to come back? Because I think there is very much a core of defensive backs that you can make out of this that are still left. You have Braden Marshall. He'll have another year of eligibility. Damari Henderson has another year of eligibility. Antoine Jackson has another year of eligibility. DJ Bell has another year of eligibility. Jaden Bellamy has another year of eligibility. That is a very good core of defensive backs if you can keep them. You obviously need to bring in some depth, and Johnson could probably do that, but that's a good core. And if Johnson can retain that core, then defensive back will be a very important position going forward. For me, you don't want to lose your defensive backs, because I would argue that was one of UCF's better performances because of what they had to add there this past offseason, and they did well there.
The concern is obviously, of course, Johnson taking over for Harris, who left, who is going to end up, it looks like, Florida staff. Was originally going to look like Florida State to join his brother, Tim Harris, but now it looks like Florida is where he's going to end up there. The concern is always, do the players follow him? So this is part of the chess match that goes on at this time of year. A position that we both had on our list, I had it up as my number 2 priority. I don't remember where you had, I think yours was number 2 as well. You could correct me if I'm wrong, Bryce. It is offensive line. Offensive line is a position, and of course, UCF also officially announced on their new offensive line coach, A.J. Blazik, who comes over from Wisconsin. He spent the last 2 years at Wisconsin. This was first broken over a week ago by UCFsports.com's Brandon Helwig, our good friend. And Bryson, he comes in, I think, at a very pivotal time in this offensive line that is, they're going to have to rebuild the entire offensive line. They lost 6 veterans, basically, either via graduation or the transfer portal, all who played significant snaps in 2025. According, again, to the Max Olson article column on ESPN.com, offensive tackles at the Power 4 conference level average between $500,000 and to $1 million, somewhere in between, while guards and centers average $300,000 to $700,000 overall. And it's going to be interesting. Blazik, well, obviously being here now, will get to pick his type of players. But man, they're going to have to get some guys that can plug and play right away and try to upgrade this offensive line, which I think got more maligned than it probably should have, considering everything it went through with the passing of Coach Clark. But that is one position that is going to be very busy now. All of a sudden, Bryce, both the defensive line and offensive line, which is really where it's pretty expensive in the portal. Interesting. What's your reaction first to the Blazik hire and then the offensive line? Because we both had that in our respective articles.
Well, I think the biggest thing, and by the way, the article that you were mentioning, Eric, about position that are needed in the portal, and this was as of December 22nd. My three were quarterback, defensive tackle, and linebacker. Offensive line was not mentioned in there, and
Oh,
I'll
so we
talk about the other
disagreed.
positions.
All right, we disagreed.
Yeah, yeah. Well, this is the reason because with the offensive line, Coach Frost has said on his radio show with Mark Daniels that offensive line is a position that he likes developing from the high school level. He doesn't really like doing plug and plays there that much. And so my guess is that he's going to try and do that. Now, we'll see how it ends up happening because he did lose some people in the portal to that. But it's clear that out of all position groups, I think Coach Frost is more interested in developing offensive linemen over a long period of time than anything else. And I'm taking him at his word on that. That's me taking him at his word. And so when you look at the players that are entering the portal, you could probably plug in maybe one or two, but I think you have people like Preston Cushman, who has another year of eligibility so far. Haven't heard much from him. You have Connor Meadows, has confirmed he is coming back. So there's someone you can build on there. You you still have some players that you could really develop into with that right there. But the big thing with AJ Blazek, the big thing that he brings to the table is his disciplining. And what I mean by that is his offensive lines do not get flagged a lot. The big thing with UCF's offensive line is just how badly they were penalized this season. UCF was one of the most penalized teams in the FBS last season, and a lot of those penalties were from pre-snap penalties, as Coach Frost talked about them, which false starts, delay of games, holding. Holding was not pre-snap, but there was some holds there, what have you. So meanwhile, Wisconsin, under AJ Blazek, they have been one of the least penalized teams in college football. So I think this is a big statement from Scott Frost in terms of hiring Blazek that he does not want his offensive line giving up a free yards to opponents, because I really do feel like that killed them, like that this offense, because this offense was already hobbled by by injuries and all that type of stuff. And so getting penalized a whole bunch of times was not doing anything to help them. I actually do think that there's a chance penalties could have been the difference from UCF making it to a bowl and not making it to a bowl. I think there could be an argument to be made there.
I think we're on disagree. Yes, I think Scott Frost ideally would like to develop offensive linemen instead of spending money. He knows that's where the expensive position is in the market. The problem is you've got a new offensive line coach who probably has his own ideas of what guys he likes. Number one. Number two, I don't think for next year, if they want to compete, if they want to have a winning record next year, I think you're a year away from that plan. This signing class, I don't think could fixes your offensive line. I think you need another year of a signing class before you could start kind of mixing in. I think they're going to be aggressive in the portal with the offensive line overall, especially with the new coach there, because you don't know of the guys that are still there, how many could play, how can't, do they buy into the new coach's philosophy on that? Plus, depending on who they attract to be the quarterback to come here, you're going to have to sell that quarterback on a good offensive line. So that's the other issue that they're going to have to address on that. All right, repeat again the three positions you said they need to address.
So I said quarterback, defensive tackle, which we talked about, and linebacker.
All right. Well, we want people to click on your article, so find out why you think it's a linebacker. We won't address linebacker just so people can click on your article. But let's get to the quarterback position, because that's the position everybody's talking about. Since we both have that, you had that at the top of your list as I did.
I didn't do them in any particular order.
All right.
But
Well, I did. I had that number one. Now what kind of quarterback do you think UCF needs? Because you seem to like, I mean, there's a lot of variations here. You have the two freshman quarterbacks in Marriott and Carr. Could they get some significant snaps or not? There's the Cam Fadcher part of it, where if he gets an extra year of eligibility, could he come back? There is the option of, can UCF afford inexpensive quarterback. There's been a lot of rumors and innuendo and speculation. Where are you right now as far as the quarterback room for UCF?
Well, we already know the type of quarterback that Coach Frost likes. We know this already. We've seen it with Mackenzie Milton, and I think we saw it with the fact that he chose Cam Fancher to be the starting quarterback in week one. Because let's remember that Fancher was Frost's first choice. And when you look at his rushing numbers, you can see why he wants that. Because Taven Jackson, he didn't really run the ball all that much, at least with comparison to Fancher. So I think that if Fancher doesn't come back, then if Marriott or Carr are able to scamper with the ball and make plays happen enough, then yeah, they could see playing time. It's entirely possible. We saw Dylan Gabriel get playing time as a freshman because of his abilities with the ball. Of course, you probably still want to bring somebody in from the portal to make some competition with them. Davi Belfort, let's not forget him. His rushing ability, I think, was very much put on display this past season. Heck, he almost led a game-winning drive with his legs. The problem it has been his arms, but let's not forget he only just finished his redshirt freshman season. He still has a few years of eligibility left. If you are able to, and he has Mackenzie Milton mentoring him. So I don't think we count Davi Belfort out of this yet.
Yeah, I'm not convinced he'll be on this roster by the time January 16th this rolls around. We'll see. I don't think a starter is on this roster.
Think I think it's not impossible, but because you could definitely try to make do. Because let's not forget, quarterbacks are definitely going to be going for a lot of money in the transfer portal, and UCF has already been burned twice by spending a lot of money. First on KJ, and then again on Taven in a way. So I don't know. I mean, first time. What was that phrase? First time shame on you, second time shame on me. Like, do you really want to be spending that much money on a quarterback again, even though you failed twice at it? Or do you try to reallocate those resources somewhere else and go and work on that and try to develop the quarterbacks that you are bringing in? Because there are three between Belford and then Marriott and Carr. You maybe get Fancher back for another year. That's three young quarterbacks that you could develop, and then Fancher is able to kind of hold the door. And let's hold the door. I mean, I think it's not impossible that they can stick with what they have at the quarterback room and make it work. I mean, I think ideally they want to bring a quarterback in, but I don't know how much of a clear starter it'll be. That's going to be the thing to see.
I do think there's a chance Fancher comes back. If for nothing else, he could be your backup, a veteran backup, which is hard to find these days. If they strike out in the market, you bring Fancher back, and maybe he's your bridge to one of the kids, Marriott or Carr. But the question is that I think Scott Frost and Coach Cooper and Mackenzie Milton have to decide is, how soon do you want Marriott or Carr, which is believed to be the future? Marriott is the higher recruit. How quickly do you want him on the field? Do you want him on the field as a true freshman? Do you want to redshirt him? So I think that will play into the decision there. Now, you bring up a valid point. It's easy to say, hey, you want a quarterback. It is the most expensive position in the portal by far. According to Max Olson's article, again, you're probably going to have to spend at least at a minimum $1 to $2 million for an experienced starter, with a less established option likely coming in below that range, which is for a power four to play in the power four market. There's numbers that are even higher than that. Brent Sorsby, for example, who's transferring from Cincinnati, all speculation has him going to Texas Tech, possibly making $4 to $5 million. Which is just absurd. But again,
that's that oil money.
But there's two names. I brought up two quarterbacks that I think if UCF were to swing for the fences, and this would be a home run shot, they're going to shoot for the fences, whether you agree with the expending or not. There's two quarterbacks that I think that certainly if UCF were to go aggressive, and tell me if I told you, Bryson, this staff's going big, they're going to swing big. I think these are the two names that people have been brought up. What I'm going to bring up, and this really picked up last week with some news in the UFL, and that's, of course, uh, Rocco Beck, the Iowa State quarterback who's in the portal. His father is Anthony Beck, the former NFL tight end with the Jets. Um, Anthony Beck just got named to the Orlando franchise in the UFL as a head coach about a week ago. So there's a lot of speculation here, Bryson, with his father in town. One of the people that helps with the UFL and the Orlando franchise is a booster at UCF, a donor. Perhaps that all can get you Rocco Beck to come to UCF as a year, be next to his dad, and perhaps maybe at a lesser deal than you would think you would get financially. Rocco Beck obviously is from the Tampa area. Do you buy any of that, or do you think that's just people reaching?
I think it's people reaching in the sense that Rocco is going to want to make his money like the rest of them. Because because where has Anthony Beck have been? Where has he been before this? That's the question. Let me double check. He was with the Jets right before this. He was with the St. Louis Battlehawks. So all right, he wasn't that far away from Rocco in Ames, Iowa. So not entirely right. The question really is what amount of pay cut is Rocco willing to get to be next to his dad? That's going to be the big question. Will Rocco accept that? We'll see. I think it's a little bit of a reach given given the resources UCF has had to expend before. Because I don't think it's impossible. I think that's the biggest swing I think UCF could probably get though. If it's not Rocco, then I don't think you're going to get a big swing if it's not him. And so we'll see. It makes it more possible than it otherwise would have, but it's all about the money, man. Money talks.
Couple things there. Most people believe that Rocco will end up following Matt Campbell to Penn State.
Yeah,
Penn State has more money than UCF. So if it comes a bidding war, Penn State will win that. Number one. Number two, Anthony Beck, his father, did play with Scott Frost on the New York Jets. They were on the same team back in, I believe, 2000. So there's connections there. I know I am not the biggest Rocco Beck fan. Like, I don't know. Like, he didn't have a great year this past year. And part of that was because he lost his main receivers to the NFL draft. When you look at the Houston Texans, they have multiple Iowa State guys like Noel and so I wonder, would a Rocco Beck obviously would be an upgrade on what you have now, but I feel like he's one of those guys that needs to have talent around him versus a guy that can lift you. That being said, he's certainly an upgrade, could get you maybe to a winning season. We'll see. But I tend to agree with you. I think it's more wishful thinking because at the end of the day, there is this thing called airports. You can always fly out and see your dad if you want to. So let me give you this other name. Bo Pribula played at Missouri last year, was at Penn State as the backup there for a long time there before transferring to Missouri. Bo reportedly, and as sources have told me, that was a target for Scott Frost last year, that Frost went heavy on him, lost him out to Missouri. He's back in the portal. There's some speculation that Virginia Tech is a place he may end up with and reuniting with James Franklin, who obviously was recruited him at Penn State at the time. For Bo Pribula, he's a very dual threat athlete. He was the backup to Drew Aller at Penn State. Your thoughts on that? I would expect Scott to at least put in a phone call to see of his interest. I don't think it'll work out because I'm guessing that Bo Pribula's asking price is higher now than it was a year ago when he was a backup at Penn State. Granted, a highly touted backup, and he ended up going to Missouri. Getting a year as a starter at Missouri, while he didn't set the world on fire, I would imagine his asking price is a little higher, so I don't think it'll work out. What say you?
Yeah, I think so. Prabula's asking price. He's from York, Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania. It's clear that he was quite loyal to James Franklin and James Franklin staying home, and I think that loyalty could follow him to Virginia Tech. I do like the idea of going after Bo just because when you look at his stats as a starter at Missouri, he actually I don't think play did he play in every game? Yeah, I think he did.
No,
So,
he had some injuries, so he missed some games.
yeah. So I think there's a chance that Bo's price could have come down to at least a relative bargain because of his missed time. But yeah, I think between whether it's money or loyalty to his coach, I don't think it's going to happen. I think it's actually it was a little more realistic than Becht from a money standpoint, I think, though.
I agree. And I think that's who Scott likes. I think that would fit his system better, but we'll see if that works out. Is there a quarterback out there in the portal as we do this December 30 that you're keeping your eye on? That you're like, I wonder if this one might. Don't be surprised if this one ends up at UCF. Is there anybody you got your eye on before we move on?
The the only I don't think so. I was thinking about Byron Brown if he wanted to stay in Central Florida, but I think the power of an SEC money would probably call to him
Yeah,
on the
follow Golish, his head coach to Auburn. I think that's what everybody.
yeah. Yeah, there's that. I d he one thing that is interesting to me, and I do interesting to me, is the prospect of EJ Colson making a UCF return. And the reason I say that is because he transferred away to Incarnate Word to get some starting quarterback time. But remember, he was there during the Malzahn era, which we now know might not have been the best time for the UCF locker room. And so if EJ Colson was willing to hear Coach Frost out, and then he sees how the locker room has changed, if he thinks that that is an improved UCF locker room than what he had before, then maybe that would fix the issues that maybe he could have had while he was at UCF, and that might bring him back. I think Colson would honestly make a lot of sense. Since bringing FCS transfers, I think has worked out fairly well for UCF so far. I mean, Cole Kozlowski was I would argue, one of the better players on UCF this season, and he was brought up from the FCS. And Colson already has history with UCF. UCF, so I think he's worth a call, and he has history with UCF. So I'll look this. I'm not going to say it's a slam dunk. There's no way it's a slam dunk, but I think that there's at least something to look at when it comes to that.
My pushback there, he's got multiple years of eligibility. Does UCF want a quarterback with multiple years of eligibility if you're putting your stock on a Rocco Marriott, for example? And
Oh,
does he fit the system? We'll see. But it wouldn't surprise me if UCF ends up with somebody like that, somebody in the FCS level, for example. I don't think that's crazy at all. I think when because you do need, they're going to get a quarterback. Just from the numbers standpoint, they're going to need to get a quarterback. At what level that is remains to be seen on that. Let's move real quick. One more position I want to address before we move on, because there is other stuff to talk about. The running back position, Bryson. I had this on my list, number 3 on my list. And this is an interesting position now. You have the graduations of Miles Montgomery and Jaden Nixon. Stacey Gage enters the portal, or at least reports come out that he's going to enter the portal. It came out Christmas Eve, which I think surprised some people there. There's not much depth or experience now in that backfield, Bryson. Tavian Swint has announced he'll be back, but he didn't play one snap last year. I don't know if this staff wants to go with an unproven running back as your starter. I think they're going to go after a running back position. According to On3's Pete Nakos, USC's Brian Jackson has been linked to UCF as a possibility there. Your thoughts on the running back position?
yeah. Honestly, if I were UCF and I was pouring a lot of money into getting an offensive player from the transfer portal, I would be going running back. And just because of how crucial the rushing game is, I think that it was a little on the lackluster side. I mean, Jaden Nixon did a very good job of being a change of pace back, but I think Miles Montgomery might not have done as well as you maybe would want in a workhorse back. which is the role he kind of ended up taking. And so I think you want to try to bring in somebody that is able to kind of be that workhorse back while you're able to develop somebody like, I think honestly Adai made a very good case to be the new Jaden Nixon. To be, he showed some very good ability in the passing game. He's had some solid runs. I think if you develop him, I think he could be a solid change of pace back. At the very least, I think he's going on scholarship this year. I'm excited for that video to come out at some point. Love when those videos come out. But as far as the portal goes, yeah, you definitely want to get somebody to be your workhorse back. I particularly want to. You mentioned USC. I still want to keep an eye out for CJ Baxter because, in my opinion, because Edgewater High School graduate, and yes, he's one of the higher touted running backs in the portal, but again, for me, I believe that you probably want to spend more money on a running back than you would a quarterback because you have a lot of enough young quarterbacks in the room right now with the potential for Cam Fancher to come back that I think you try to develop a quarterback this time around to go for that because you've already been burned twice by chasing big money in the transfer portal.
So are you willing to punt on next year to develop a quarterback?
I'm more willing to do that this time around than I was before. There needs to be something different because it's already bit
And
twice.
I don't have an issue with that. But I think you're understanding if you decide go youth movement in that position, you're punting on next year. The goal is to develop the guy and have him ready for the following year. If you do that, I don't and
don't
maybe
get Cam back. Well, and don't get Cam back. If you get Cam back, I feel like you could potentially do something with that. But
we'll see. But the running back, one thing I'm fascinated to watch here in this portal and how it plays out. For example, like the Stacey Gage, one of my disappointments of this past year, one of many. We didn't see Swint and Gage play a lot. Like Gage got hurt, he got some snaps, then he got hurt. Swint never played a snap. I thought that was going to be the future of this backfield. Clearly, it's not. Maybe Swint will be. I wonder if Stacey Gage ends up in Tallahassee, Bryson, and reunites with his running back coach, Cam Martin, who was just recently hired by Gus Malzahn. Gus is bringing back the band together in his offensive staff this year, if you follow that very closely. I'm very curious, how many players that UCF loses that enters the portal ends up at Florida State. Does a Stacey Gage end up at FSU? FSU has had some running backs enter the portal themselves, or reportedly. I could see that happening. On the other side of the things, FSU's receiver, Boggs, remember it was kind of a touted here, UCF, then ended up going to FSU and followed Gus. He's entering the portal. Does Boggs maybe come home and come to UCF and maybe help out with the wide receiver depth? Those are some things to watch, the back and forth between UCF and Florida State that's kind of ongoing in the portal. Is going to be for me personally, is fascinating on how all that kind of plays out. But I think that's my concern. I like Cam Martin a lot as the running back coach when he was here, and I think he'll do a good job at Florida State. And that's my big concern, Bryson, is we're going up against him now. Nothing against this current regime, but I really liked him, and I don't think the running back excelled under Cam Martin.
No, you're right. He did, and we'll see. I mean, this is another chance for Jimmy Beal to make a standout decision in the transfer portal because I do think that the class of 2024 that he got with Nixon, Adai, Swint, and then Nixon from the portal has made up a majority of the running back room this past season, and so I think that the development of Nixon, Adai, and Swint will probably be a big thing to look at when it comes to how Beal has turned out at running backs coach. We'll see who ends up getting a majority of the carries, but I think it's more likely than not. At the very least, we're going to get a workhorse back out of the portal, while Swint and Adai could probably factor in more of a change of pace level. We all know that Scott Frost loves his multi running back rooms.
All right, keep it up on blackandgoldbanneret.com. We'll keep you updated. The portal is scheduled to open on January 2nd. Bryson is going to keep you updated as well. He'll be writing every time there on SI of any players that enter the portal. And again, we're recording this on late Tuesday afternoon, December 30th. So there might be more transactions that go on or reports by the time you listen to this episode or watch this episode. So keep that in mind. And I have a feeling, Bryson, you and I will be back real soon, probably the next week, when we have some official names to talk about. But let's put table football for now. Let's talk some men's basketball because this is Big 12 week. Big 12 conference play on the men's side will begin this weekend. UCF at home will host Kansas, 2 o'clock at Addition Financial Arena. Game will be on Peacock. Make a note of that. More on that later. Your thoughts on the Knights? 11-1. You were at Disney watching UCF come from a 14-point deficit to beat FAU. As we record this, UCF's net rankings is 36. 11-1, best start in the Dawkins era. But now the competition goes up a level, starting with Kansas on Saturday.
Yes, it does. I think UCF has put itself in a really good position going into non-conference place. A lot of quad three games that they managed to get on the schedule. The Texas A&M win, as of right now, I think the win against Texas A&M is actually their biggest win of the season at this point, because that's, I think, is what really put them on the map. And they've managed to not falter since then. And so now they're in a really good position going into Big 12 play, but now you're going into a league that has all but one team in the top 100 in the net rankings. So it's going to be a gauntlet the rest of the way. The question is going to be, can the team hold up for that? But that being said, this starting five is, I would argue, one of the best from a top to bottom standpoint that UCF has had in quite some time. And so if Riley Kugel has managed to emerge from like the little bit of the slump he's been in the past few games, then this could be a UCF team that makes noise. I wouldn't be shocked if they did.
Many of the bracketologists have UCF in, some as last four buys in, last as a last four in. We'll see what they open up against Kansas. Kansas, a lot of up in the air right now on the status of Darren Peterson. Darren Peterson is a lottery pick projected. Some have him as the number one pick projected in the NBA lottery draft. He's been dealing with a hamstring injury, has missed a lot of time. We don't know if he'll be available for this game against UCF, which I think is a big game, Bryson, for UCF to get off a good start. Our colleague Jake wrote on blackandgoldbanneret.com, two big games right off the bat. You host Kansas, and then you go to Stillwater to play a much improved Oklahoma State team that's kind of in the mixture there with their second-year head coach. Tough trip before then you host Cincinnati and all the drama that's going to come with that game. What's your thoughts on UCF? They're averaging 87 points a game offensively, maybe on pace to be the best offense ever, but there's still some questions overall defensively as they get in Big 12. What are you looking forward to here in the first couple of games?
And the big thing is going to be, how do you start out? Because so far, over these past couple of games, UCF has kind of fell behind a little bit, fell on the back foot a little bit to start, and had to really roar their way back later on. But you can't really do that with a Big 12 opponent, or at least it's going to be a lot harder to do that. Oh, it'll be interesting to see how UCF will be able to do that. You do that. They've done very well down low, but of course that's been taking advantage of teams that maybe might not be as big as UCF is. Big 12 teams are as big as UCF is, if not bigger. So how do your forward players, Devin Cambridge, John Bull, and Jermichael Stillwell, how do they hold up against the likes of other Big 12 big men?
And Jeremy Fomina, too, added to that. So you're right. That's the big key. And we don't know that. And we're going to start off with Kansas on Saturday, 2 o'clock. Peacock is the game. So it's on Peacock.
UCF on Peacock. How about that?
There you go. I think Rich Hollenberg will be on the call for that one with Brendan Haywood on there. Hopeful the best. A lot of people believe the Big 12 is an 8 to 10 bid league, the number one conference in college basketball, Bryson. They're as strong as it gets, and that'll be the challenge for UCF. But hopefully they can get off to a good start at home against Kansas. Hopefully they get the crowd support. What do you think? I know it's the first weekend of January. I know some people may not be back from, maybe are still not in town. What do you think the attendance will be like?
I think if it's anything like the last time Kansas was in Addition Financial Arena, I think it'll be I think it'll still be pretty hopping at Edition Financial Arena. Maybe it might not be as hopping as it were when the students are in town, but I don't believe the students were in town last time. It was January 10th was the date the last time they were there. I believe the semester hadn't started yet, right?
It was borderline. I know they played on a weekend. It was close, but there was good crowds both times, and certainly Kansas will bring their fans as well. So we'll see what happens. Big opportunity for UCF here. We'll see how that goes. Now, if you go to blackandgoldbanneret.com, we've got our quarter century rosters, teams here unveiled for basketball, men's and women's basketball. We'll touch on the women's later. But Bryson, quick thoughts on the all quarter century team for the men's side that I wrote. First, we broke them down 15 players with some obviously players that also get the receiving votes, if you will. First, second, and third team. What jumps out at you?
I would say the biggest thing that stands out to me is the love towards the 2018-19 team. Both BJ Taylor and Taco Fall managed to make the first team there. Darius Johnson ends up making his way into the second team. And then I also quite love the shout outs towards the really early part of the century with the likes of Gary Johnson and Dexter Lyons. So I think this is a very diverse team when it comes to eras, to show that like UCF men's basketball might not be its go-to sport, but UCF has had its moments, I think, over the course of this quarter century so far.
Yeah, BJ and Taco first team, two guys I think, Bryson, they're going to be talking about perhaps next fall as possible candidates to enter the UCF Athletics Hall of Fame, by the way. The third player on that team you're referencing is Aubrey Dawkins. That was a tight vote. Wow, we had an incredible panel. We had panels of historians, people that have covered the team since the quarter century beginning. So we had a big list. So thanks to everybody in there. But I know Aubrey Dawkins got one of the last votes in, and I was one of them. I voted for Aubrey Dawkins, and one of the reasons why, Bryson, to me, you can't talk about that UCF basketball history, and especially that 2018-19 season without Aubrey Dawkins, who not only played maybe the greatest individual game that any Knight has ever played, that Aubrey Dawkins played against Duke in the second round. If you look at his numbers in the preseason tournament that they had and everything, he's been their UCF's best player. He's arguably the best postseason player, UCF basketball player ever. I think that's why I voted for him on this roster. Other notables, Keith Clanton is on this team, maybe one of the best front court guys there as well. Dexter Lyons, Bryson, who just entered the UCF Athletics Hall of Fame, edging out Taylor Hendricks for first team. Any issues there?
Yeah. Yes. That was
tight vote. Tight vote.
Yep. Extremely tight vote. I was quite intrigued by that one, but Dexter was voted in the UCF Athletics Hall of Fame for a reason. He saw his time in the professionals as well. He had multiple seasons. Hendricks only had the one, so I can see it. I can see it. For me, I really like to see some other people getting their due. Isaiah Sykes got in there in the second team. Roberto Morantine, Paul Reed getting in there in the third team. I am very interested to see how these guys will be recognized in UCF history. Because let's not forget, Dexter Lyons is a UCF Athletics Hall of Famer in this group. Jermaine Taylor is a UCF Athletics Hall of Famer within this group. So there are some members here that I think you could definitely make the argument that they are potentially UCF Athletics Hall of Fame bound at some point in the future. Keith Clanton being one of them that I think has maybe gone a little bit underappreciated with time.
Check out the article on blackandgoldbanneret.com for the full list of the men's all-quarter century team, as well as the honorable mentions, as well as you could check out the women's. Let's talk about the women's all-quarter century team first, Bryson. What stood out to you there with the women's team? Notable players, KK Wright, unanimous on the first team. Also, we had a great panel for this as well that's covered women's basketball among the last 20 years. Diamond Battles, of course, is a first teamer along there. Asia Patrick, who's a high school coach in the state, as well, is on that team. What jumps out to you?
I have KK Wright, unanimous selection. Diamond Battles, Diamond Battles was there as well. Aisha Patrick was a really good was there. I think the professionals was a major part as well in there. Masni Kaba and Emma Cannon both got their their time, their opportunity to go pro. Emma Cannon in particular is actually in the pros right now with the Los Angeles Sparks, if I remember correctly. So she's managed to stick around. Yeah, Coach Abe era, I think, is fairly heavily in here. You had Nyla Schuler there in the third team, Tay Sanders, Brittany Smith there in the second team. Coach A, that era produced, I think, some of the highest success that UCF women's basketball has had in its in program history. So I think it makes a lot of sense why she has a good amount of players in here. It's not all of them, but there's a good amount of them.
Nia Schuler edged out Destiny Thomas. That was a very tight vote in the ballots there. I want to ask you about a player you covered that was also polarizing in this, and that was Caitlin Peterson. Makes it as a third teamer, but she was off certain people's ballots. You voted for her. I voted for her, but there were others that didn't. Your thoughts on the polar, which was interesting because you consider Caitlin Peterson's resume here. She is the all-time leading scorer per average, 21 points a game, was an all Big 12 performer, yet some people did not have her. What was your reaction? Were you surprised by that? What was your reaction to that? Because that was nip and tuck. She almost didn't make it. She barely makes this team, which you would a little surprising with the players. Of course, she's now at Ole Miss. There are a handful of players on this roster. Emma Cannon, you mentioned, who transferred out of UCF. We better get used to that as we move forward. I know people are like, how we evaluate that? That's going to become more of the norm, especially go at judging players on the men's side, 1-year players versus 4-year players. But your reaction to Caitlin Peterson, because that was a polarizing one based on the ballots that we received.
Yes, it was. And look, I can see why. I mean, look, her time at UCF, the team didn't exactly, do maybe what it could have done. Big, losing records and all that. But she was still an all Big 12 player, which is nothing to sneeze at. Big 12 and women's basketball is a very competitive conference. So I think the fact that Peterson is one of the best in the conference in scoring, she's a really good basketball player. I think she's proven herself and deserves that regardless of the team's success. Now, you could argue that because the team really went through her a lot of the time, that her stats are more based off of volume than of talent. And that's an argument that you can make. I could totally buy that argument. But until we, I think, see a little more of what Caitlin Peterson does post UCF, I think that in the end, when you look at the stuff that she has accomplished, regardless of how much volume, how much of it had to do with volume, UCF would not have been the team that it was had Caitlin Peterson had not been there. And it might not have been ideal at the time, but could have been worse. I mean, it could have been worse. I mean, you look at Houston as of recently. UCF has done better. UCF has done better than Houston has as of late with women's basketball. So Caitlin Peterson could easily be a difference maker with like maybe a dissatisfactory women's basketball program versus a women's basketball program in free fall.
This is what we call a segue here. So let me ask you this, put you on the spot here, Bryson. Does this current UCF team miss a Caitlin Peterson?
I think it depends on what you're looking at, because again, Caitlin Peterson had a lot going her way, as in going through her. That's not really as apparent as it is now. Kyle Nagodu has been getting a good amount of time alongside Leah Harmon as of late. I think you kind of see what Caitlin Peterson has done with Leah Harmon. I think the biggest difference is that Caitlin's more of a shooting guard while Harmon's more of a point guard. So there's a little bit of a difference there, I think. But I think I think that they maybe don't miss a Caitlin Peterson in that they are more multidimensional without her. But I think they do miss her when it comes to her talent. I think that I think that she has the most talent out of the players UCF has now, but I think they traded that to be more multidimensional because now UCF opponents can't just go, okay, swarm Caitlin Peterson, and that's how you cut off UCF. Here, you kind of have to spread yourself out a little bit more, and it's more of an onus on on UCF to be more of a multi-dimensional team. And in some ways, I feel like they've succeeded a little bit because Ngodu, again, has been pretty good this season so far.
Well, but they might be missing other pieces. UCF, of course, opened Big 12 play at home. They lost to BYU by double digits. BYU kind of controlled the paint. Turnovers, which has been an issue all year for UCF women's basketball, continues. They are playing at Lubbock New Year's Eve. Nothing says New Year's Eve like Lubbock, Texas. A Texas Tech team that has flipped their roster, Bryson, with some money, and they're undefeated. They are one of the surprises. Where have we heard that before? Where are we with women's basketball here as we're now a game into the Big 12, a Big 12 league that's number 3 conference in the sport and has a stacked league once again in women's basketball?
Yeah, I don't think that women's basketball gave itself a good a transition into conference play because you look at what they did. They lost to Stetson for the first time in quite a long time. Gave up 35 points to just one of its players right there. Their coach Lynn Bria, former UCF women's basketball coach, leading the Hatters there. You go from that to against a pair of opponents that are above, I believe, that are ranked worse than 300 in the net rankings. You can't really tell a lot there. They even gave up the lead for a little bit of time in one of those games early on. And then you go from that into conference play against BYU, and yeah, you get beaten by double digits. It has definitely not been a solid stretch for UCF women's basketball as of late. I don't. It'll be interesting to see how they could try to right the ship on this one. I think they know who they are at this point. I mean, I think we've seen Leah Harmon really take up a leadership role. She's very much a go-to player. We saw Jacoria Bracey, get a very experienced player, get a good amount of opportunities. Kyle Ngodu, very much the leader at the boards there. You're gonna have to see how these players evolve with each other. I remember Coach Messer talking about how these players, really getting used to playing with each other. I remember with the turnover when I've asked her about the turnovers, I remember her talking about how they got to they got to get used to each other and are trying to go for a little more than what was there. And so the team really, I think, needs to kind of get used to that if they want to be able to step up to some of these Big 12 teams.
Couple stats. This is courtesy, by the way. You can check a recap of the BYU game from Kyle Nash, who covered the game. Bryson. BYU outscored UCF 22-6 in the third quarter to break that game open by winning by 21. UCF turned it over 20 times. BYU out-rebounded UCF 48-32, 20 offensive rebounds. They had 40 points in the paint, BYU did over UCF. That is something to monitor as they go into Big 12 play, because I think that a lot of teams are going to try to attack the glass against a UCF team that maybe it's not as big. It's not as big as maybe they were, say, a year or two ago.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I think the player you're going to really want to look out for on that one is Mahogany Chandler Roberts. She is the big woman on this team right there, and she's been starting about as much as Kyle Ngodu, and she ended up getting no rebounds in that BYU game, despite the playing time that she got. Savannah Scott, in comparison, she only played 11 minutes and got 2. So, Mahogany also went 0 for 3 as well. She didn't really get that many shots off either. So I think that her development, she's only a sophomore coming into this year, if memory serves. So I think her development is going to kind of be a major point of emphasis on can these other Big 12 bigs stand up to that? Because if Mahogany is able to give them another option down low, then that might be able to open up some doors for UCF on that one.
All right, we'll follow women's basketball here as well. What's their next home game?
Their next home game is going to be against also against the Jayhawks, funnily enough.
Sunday.
They're coming. Yeah, so they're coming. Yeah, Sunday, January 4th. So the very next day
Wow. That's a quick
from
turnaround.
from the men's team. Well, I mean, I guess I imagine it probably saves some money for the Kansas athletic department.
That's true. I wonder the deal in there. So we'll keep it updated. We'll have people covering it all weekend long at Edition Financial Arena. A couple quick notes before we go and get out of here. Bryson, we're going to put on the shot clock, so we got to go quick on this. We're not going to delve on this, but I do want to address a couple things. Congratulations to Clarence Awador, All-American for men's soccer. First soccer player in about 4 years. As well as Ava Armour, honorable mention All-American in volleyball for UCF teams, respectively. Congrats to them. Some transactions on volleyball as well. They're football, not the only one involved in the portal here, Bryson.
Yes, UCF brought in a transfer from UCLA in Kiki Horn. Side hitter from UCLA, has 2 years of eligibility left. She's coming off a year where she ended up not playing a little bit. I haven't gotten confirmation on this, but there's a chance that she got injured. She missed a good amount of matches in 2025, but in 2024, she managed to put down 186 kills as a freshman, very solidly done there. And then they also brought in Emma Cook back on November 14th, a JUCO transfer from Eastern Florida State College. So not as active in the portal as football is, but that's how roster sizes work. But solid addition there from Coach Botsford.
Important thing is Ava Armour is on the roster. Women's soccer made a big ad on the portal.
They've had a couple. They had a couple of ads actually. They got. Let me see. She got a player from I believe former Washington State one right there. It's interesting. I remember when Coach Tiff was talking to us before when the UCF women's soccer team was announced for the NCAA tournament, and she was talking about how she really wanted to build up the forwards from the transfer portal in particular, and I think she's shown to do that. You have Naomi Clark, who's coming over from Oklahoma. She was the team leader for the Sooners in scoring right there. But then she also ended up getting a defender as well. I believe Carly Cruz from Memphis there. She was a defender. Memphis, of course, was the place that Coach Tiff ended up getting Hanukkah Hamano from, who ended up becoming, I believe, an all-region selection for UCF this year. And now they're bringing in a defender, and Carly Cruz, who just finished their redshirt freshman season there. So some early action from UCF women's soccer in terms of volleyball. We'll see if there's any other additions that could end up being made there, because the portal really worked out for them this time around. Considering some portal additions ended up getting all region honors as UCF went on to the NCAA tournament.
We'll keep track of all of that. And of course, now the New Year calendar into January. We got golf seasons, the tennis seasons about to get ready to get going for UCF, as well as baseball, softball. The baseball, softball schedules are out, as is the tennis schedules. Bryson and I will go in depth on that on a future episode at some point. Once things slow down, if there's such a thing, maybe in the next episode or two, we'll break down baseball, softball, get you a little bit what to look for there. Maybe next episode that we come on the air, whenever that is. But we're going to obviously keep track of the football transfer portal. Opens January 2nd. There's going to be a lot of moves left and right, as well as, of course, men's basketball and women's basketball Big 12 play going on. Follow Bryson. Make sure you check him out at SI for the football men's basketball coverage. He'll be following the Olympic sports here on blackandgoldbanneret.com. We'll be following at football men's hoops. Might be me that's covering the Kansas. I am going to be at the Kansas game, so it might be me that's covering it for Banneret, or Don. I'm not sure. Everybody's doing a lot of different stuff this holidays. Maybe they're it's the new year. They're waiting for the ball to drop, I guess. Thanks for everybody. Make sure you check out the articles on blackandgoldbanneret.com. The all quarter century articles are out. My top 5 needs for UCF in the transfer portal, and much more. For Bryson Turner, I'm Eric Lopez. Happy New Year. We'll talk to you in the new year. This has been Night Shift. Blackandgoldbanneret.com for all the latest news at UCF.